end up getting it 3 minutes late. So looks like we started the recording. And it's 3:02. We'll give everyone one more minute to get in and we'll get started right at 3:03. All right, well, it's 3:03, so let's get started. Thanks everyone for showing up for the webinar today on why careful matters with AI coding or careful coding with AI. I wanted to give a presentation. I want to thank Caitlin for asking me to do this and helping come up with a topic. I'm been coding for about 20 years. I've been IT for over 30 years. I'm very new to AI, so this can be kind of a collaborative session. The coding with AI changes a lot of things. And sometime last year, it feels like the AI changed. I've been playing with it a lot before that. And then it started actually making a big impact and not just regurgitating Stack Overflow. And so I want to go over some things today about, you know, what are some of the fundamentals we need to do to make sure that, especially we don't get burned out. That's huge, right? Because there's an interesting article that I was reading about yeah, you can do this at 10 times the speed, but you're probably going to get burned out. I want to highlight that this isn't an endorsement for using these tools. There's a lot of environmental impacts for AI tools and a lot of other things, but it seems like you know they're kind of here to stay potentially. So and in a job, we all have to pay rent, we have to eat, so there's going to be a lot of potential for you're going to get in a job and you're going to have to use AI. So what are some of the things we can do to balance everything with AI and make sure that we're still producing high quality code? You may have seen recently that there's been a lot of um, articles and postings about uh, AWS having some production issues, other companies having production issues related to AI coding, and we don't want to get into those situations, right? We don't want to have our end users or outages be what tells us that we've got some bad code in there. So uh, I'm open to questions. There during the talk, raise your hand. You can use the Zoom tools to raise your hand. Also, there'll be 15 minutes at the end dedicated to questions and answers. Um, the goal here is really how teams can use AI responsibly in and help them accelerate their development. One thing I do want to say is there are some good things about AI. If you can see my screen here, one of my friends and I had talked about starting an AI company to help, people do with appeals on their health insurance. And this is a site, when I was doing research on doing that kind of a tool, I found this site and it's Fight Your Health Insurance. And it's really to help you, you know, get appeals when you get denials and stuff. So to me, that's really a great use of AI and very people oriented, and I like that. So let's see. All right. So the objective here today is how you can accelerate delivery without accelerating chaos and understanding how AI is going to impact you with modern software development. What are the fundamentals that are essential always, whether you're using AI or not? These are the same fundamentals. And some of the patterns for using AI safely, some of the things you have to do, and making sure that you're using it in a way that's safe. And it can't do things that you don't want it to do. I've known some developers that started using AI to help them accelerate their delivery in the last year or two prior to it becoming super popular. And they were able to get so much work done. They took a second job on. They were able to do two jobs using AI as their kind of assistant to help them get code done. But also, doing more can lead to burnout. So we have to really be careful with that. We'll talk a little bit about all of these practices. Here's our agenda, why it matters, the fundamentals, again, the AI can't replace. We're going to talk a little bit about coding with AI as a pull request workflow. And I don't mean AI doing your pull request. I mean AI changing some code and you treating it like a pull request before you create your pull request. And we'll go into that some ways to use AI safely. What are some of the ways you can start using it to learn what it does? What are some of the guardrails you can put in place? What are the right things to use AI for? Working with your team, getting your agreements together so your team understands what you want to do. You might even have to talk to your company about what things are allowed to do. There's some questions right now about copyright in AI. The Supreme Court did a case where they said AI artwork couldn't be copyrighted. How does that apply to code? If AI generates your code and it's not clearly identifiable that this section is AI and this section is not, it's possible that your entire code base could be, open source if you want it, even if you didn't want it to. Not copyrightable would be a better way to say that. So there's some questions about that, and that is all going to need to be resolved. So you definitely want to talk to your company if you're using this. Metrics, value stream, and hidden work. We're going to talk a little bit about, what not to do if your company's measuring certain things, with KPIs. And there's been talk about starting to measure with lines of code again. And it's kind of funny. Somebody had mentioned to me that when somebody had said that, they said, okay, AI, generate that function with twice the lines of code. You could do that. So gaming the system, things like that. And how do we, really measure the value we're delivering to our company, and then Q&A at the end. All right. So AI doesn't really fix the problems, right? It amplifies them. AI is not just going to solve problems for you. And when you think about it, if you've got a process that you're using for your software development at your company, and that process was designed for humans in the mix everywhere, it might be able to handle 2 or 3 times, but 10 times, what's going to break, right? Where are the true bottlenecks? And I was, reading an article again where I was agreeing with somebody who was saying the bottleneck was never really delivering code, right? It's getting good quality specifications in and making sure the software works to those specifications. So if those are where your slow points are now, you're still going to have those slow points. So you might need to focus on doing things like more testing, more unit testing, more integration testing, and those things. Automate those things, and then you can have AI generate code, and those tests can validate it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We have to remember that AI is non-deterministic. What that means is you can give it the same question, and it's going to produce something different, potentially different every time, right? So if you have strong fundamentals, AI can help you accelerate. If you don't have those strong fundamentals, you can even use AI to help you gain those strong fundamentals. You can have AI help you do things like write rules for cursor. We're going to do that later in a demo. We're going to have the AI write our cursor rules for us. You can have things like focus on doing that hidden work, like writing tests that maybe isn't always identified by the business as having value, but we know it has value. If you're using AI and you have unclear requirements, you're going to have the same thing, right? You're going to have garbage in, garbage out, right? I was talking to somebody, a fellow coder, and he was telling me that they're using AI to generate their specifications. And it's all over the place. And it's not consistent, and it's not clear, and it's actually making things worse. So there's a product called Kiro from AWS that can do spec-driven development. And you need to have very detailed, very good specifications set up. So I think that garbage in, garbage out is super important. When I say the fundamentals are still the same, AI may not remember to do things like null reference checking or typing things to the right type. What are the edge cases and non-functional requirements like logging? Does AI know to add logging in every place in your work, in your workflow? So those are things that you need to do, but AI may not. So setting up rules to tell AI you want these things is really important. What are the security basics, right? At What We Will, when we're working together, we don't really want AI working around security things. We don't want AI to have our keys into GitHub, our keys into other places, because then it can go do things. And AI is just software like any other software. It's going to have bugs. It might not always follow its rules. And, a lot of the things that I've been seeing with Cursor is it doesn't always follow the rules. A comment from a peer in the industry was saying that in Kiro, sometimes it forgets, right? And you got to go back and tell it to do certain things again and make sure and remind it. Quality is what really matters still, right? So clear goals and user stories are super important. The 2 a.m. test, right? 2 a.m., you get a call, you're on call for your software, and you get a call. Are you going to be able to go in and find the bug? When I was working at Agoda in Thailand on New Year's, I got a call. I was the manager for the department. I got a call at 1 a.m. We just pushed over into the new year, and we had a bug with the new year. And I got a call, and I was the manager. I wasn't that familiar with the code base yet. I was fairly new there. I was able to get into the code and find the area. But if AI had generated that and it was garbage code or it was not well structured, I might not have been able to find that at 2 a.m. and get another engineer on to help me build it and get it deployed and get a fix out. So that 2 a.m. test is super important in my mind. Don't code tired. That's another one that we really want to focus on, right? If you're tired, you might let AI slip and do some things you wouldn't normally do. Um, Unit test and integration and UI test coverage is super important. There's an article here that I want to show you. It's quite interesting. They rebuilt Next.js with AI in 1 week, right? But how did they do that? It was one person and AI, and they did it in 1 week. But the super important point they talk about in the article is how did they do it? They had a lot of tests. They had a ton of tests. I'm trying to find the where he quoted it here. But basically, the way they actually built it. So the project has 1,700 plus tests, 380 Playwright end-to-end tests, full TypeScript type checking. The AI was, they were able to use the AI to create the replacement for Next.js using Vite. I hope I'm saying that correct. But the only way it made mistakes. In the article, they talk about it made mistakes. It clearly made mistakes, and they were able to go back because of the testing. So if you're starting to use AI, one of the highest recommendations I can give you is build tests, right? Understand make sure you have tests that cover what your functionality is. Another aside, when I was working on some code for What We Will, I had AI generate some tests. And when it generated the tests, it actually surfaced a bug. And it was in how we were generating somebody's initials. If they had a 3-part name, like Mary Ann Jones, it picked the first 2 initials, MA. And it wrote a test for that. And instead of MJ, we'd want to have MJ, Mary Jones, instead of Mary Ann Jones, or MAJ if that was the requirement. But it was picking the first 2 names as the initials. I was able to go in, fix that. The test failed, actually wrote a passing test that would pass it if it picked the first and last, and then fix the code. And that was very helpful, just having the AI generate the tests. So I would highly recommend having, somebody posted thank you for posting the blog in the chat. I would highly recommend if you're starting with AI and you don't have a lot of UI tests and unit tests, start using the AI to help you generate those tests. And we'll jump in and we'll do a little bit of that today in Cursor as well. Some of the things that I think about are the same things that I'll do when I'm doing a coding interview for somebody, the same thing I'll look at when I'm doing a pull request for somebody. I will look at things like, are they doing client side and server side authorization or validation, right? Because somebody could disable JavaScript and call your API. And if you're not doing it on the server side, that's, you're going to have a security issue there. So those are things, we look for. Performance, reliability, logging, those non-functional requirements. Are you doing explicit API authorization? I think when you're touching security code too, you're going to have a really good review of your code. All right, oop, I'm in the wrong screen. There we go. So coding with AI is a PR workflow. I've actually been doing this for a while. Um, when I do my own code changes. So I go in and I'm doing a bunch of code changes, and then I will review all of my changes in the IDE before I actually submit a pull request, right? And I recommend to any engineer that I'm working with, they do the same thing. Understand all the changes. Well, that becomes even more important if you're using AI, right? When you're using AI, you need to be aware of all the changes, right? AI is not responsible for the code. We are. People are responsible for the code. So I highly recommend that you make sure you know all of the changes that are going in. Now, I understand that times come when you're having crunch time and you're having to, deliver a bunch of code, or there's a something going on, and you maybe can't review it all, but that should be rare, right? I highly recommend that you look at every change and understand every change before it's going in. Also recommend that you have a second human verify the changes. Obviously, if you're a single developer working on a single project, that's kind of hard to do. But you can go. One of the things that I would recommend to people is go take a quick break and take a walk and come back and review your code, right, with a fresh set of eyes. So another thing that I've done on teams before, is we would require a certain number of people to do a PR, and then they would look at the PR, and they would be mid, even senior level engineers, but mostly entry level, mid level engineers. We'd require a couple of them to review it, and then it would have a senior go in and they would review it, and they would make comments, and they would tag the people and say, hey, you missed this. Please add this to your PR review checklist. And we'll talk on the next slide about a little bit about a PR review checklist. Um, you can also use a second AI to check your code a little bit, or to, um, you know, ask two different questions. One of the things that you can see, I've got a little contrived example we'll show you here. So Microsoft Copilot is free on the web, and you can do things in it and not get charged for AI. So here's an example of a little contrived function, and I'm going to just paste it in here. And I'm going to say update this function so it returns the first and last initials if there's a three-part name passed in, because prior it didn't do this. It's a teeny bit contrived because I've changed the string type to any, right? And I want to highlight a couple things here. Um, I was hoping it would make the same change. Remember, AI is non-deterministic, but I was like, oh, wait, will it make this same change here if I do it again? And it did. It automatically changed the type any to string, right? If you didn't notice that, it might change the functionality of your code. Now, in TypeScript, that's a way of saying this is supposed to be a string and it won't let you pass in other things. But what if we had to pass in other things? Um, and it's kind of a contrived example, because I would say, oh, well, let's say you get something from an API and you don't know the data type. But then if you want it to be a string, you should cast it to a string and make sure it's a string before you pass it in for being safe. That's really the, safety of coding it. But what if I want it undefined, and I can ask the AI right here in Copilot, I can use it as a secondary check and say, what if undefined or null was passed in? And it's going to come up and it's going to go back and change the function to any. It noticed it changed it, it changed it back, and it said, oh, wait, it's not really that defensive, right? That defensive coding we want to do. And it went in and it said, okay, if you need it to be any, here's how you would make sure that you handle that case right there. So that's another thing you can do. You can check little things. Remember, though, don't paste security keys. Don't paste proprietary stuff in an open web browser like Copilot like this. Make sure you're, you know, keeping your secrets secret, and you're not passing that stuff into, you know, any type of thing that's not company approved. That would be my recommendation. Any questions so far? All right, let's go talk a little bit about the PR checklist. So PR checklist is going to be kind of specific to your architecture, your language, your framework. I think of things like no any in TypeScript, null checks in C Sharp, those types of things. How maybe you want your React component structured. Those are types of things that would be very specific. So think about your language, think about your naming conventions. Um, use pure functions where possible. A pure function is something that doesn't have side effects and that given the same parameters passed in will always produce the same results. I think this example you always see is don't look at datetime.now inside the function. Pass the date in, the two dates. If you wanted to compare like how many days since now, you would pass in now and the date that you want to have the difference done between instead of using now in the function because that function can't be tested because you don't know what the output's going to be unless you know exactly what time it is whenever the test runs. So the best way to do that is pass in both dates, then you can pass those in with a test and you can easily test that. You think about things like solid code, um, single responsibility principle, those types of things with solid code. I just showed you the safe array access. If you pass in a null value and then you try to access, something in that, it's not going to work. It's going to throw a runtime exception. You don't want those things. Um, all those non-functional requirements that we talked about, like logging, uh, observability, those types of things that you need, edge cases. So again, I mentioned it already, but encourage teammates to review other PRs and work with your team to build this checklist. I bet you there's people on your team who already have a PR checklist, right? So I would make that a public document. That's something I've done at a previous company to make a public document. And when you're going through a PR, you review that checklist and you make sure you're going through and looking for all of these things that we know are problems in the code. Oop, sorry. That was not what I meant to do. Um, so let's see. Yeah, so as far as building that checklist, work with your team. Again, build a checklist that works really well for you, the things that you know. And a lot of times it's going to be specific to a different teams, right? This team has seen these types of things tend to slip through. So we really want to focus on those. All right, so let's go to demo time. I want to call up Cursor here real quick. I'm going to move it up to my top screen and we'll make it big. Oh, I'm not going to be able to see that. I think I'm going to, okay, move it down here and share it differently. So let me get back into Zoom and share just that. Stop sharing. All right, I'm going to share just Cursor and we'll be able to see it better on this screen. Everybody able to see that okay? Looks like it should be working well.
Yep, looks good.
Thank you. So I'm in Cursor here and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to paste in a prompt and I'm going to pull it from Notepad because I just have pre-prepared a few couple of prompts. So one of the things you'll notice here, I'm stating keeping in mind that we want small, easily human reviewable pull requests. So one of the things you have to be really careful with is AI can do a lot of stuff. Had a friend who said, AI, add observability to all my code. And it just went in and changed everything. And imagine having to review that pull request. Oh my gosh, like I really would not want to have to review that pull request for AI. So one thing you can do is because we're all going to get fatigue reading through code, right? It's not most people's favorite thing to do. Most people like to write code, and that's one of the downsides of this AI changes that are happening. Is we maybe ended up writing more pull request or doing more code reviews and pull requests than actually writing code. And if I was to recommend one thing to somebody who was working for me, I would say become really amazing at doing pull requests, right? Because you're going to add a lot of value from being able to go through and read code and able to then add comments and changes that need to be done just via reading code. And that's another thing we want to do with AI is have it structure code so that it's small and small changes, small pull requests, and as well as smaller functions, right? The same things we want to do. Single responsibility. That's why I highlighted that one on the other slide. Don't have a function that's 80 lines, right? Or if it has to be 80 lines. So lines, we shouldn't really value it by lines, but don't have a function that does 5 different things. Try to have small functions that you can compose together to create your application. And then you can write smaller unit tests. You can have smaller changes and then smaller pull requests. And that makes it much easier for the humans that are still in it. And I know we can have AI doing pull requests, but I don't think we're at the point yet where I personally would trust AI writing code, reviewing code, and publishing code. And I wonder if that's how AWS had some of their outages, right? And then, maybe if you had a full test coverage and had really great test coverage, that would be something you could do. But let's go ahead and put this prompt in. Basically, I'm asking for small pull requests. I'm asking for it to do add some tests to the code, right? Where's the best place to add tests? The testing framework was already been added. This is actually the code we have for what we will. I'm not going to open anything proprietary here, but we're just going to have it add a couple tests. And then I'm going to show you basically what I would do well as my own little PR checklist. Doing a PR before the pull request, doing a code review before the pull request. And if I'm using any acronyms or anything that you don't understand, please go ahead and type it in the chat and let me know. I see there's another chat here. Let me just look. You have Bill Hall. You have a checklist of swear words, if that counts. Are those swear words you're allowed to use or swear words you're not allowed to use? All right. All right, so let's see. What did Cursor say? A great small high impact PR would be to add unit tests to the messaging. Okay. So I'm just going to say, please add those tests. I will note I'm on the free version of Cursor. The only way you can do it is in the auto in the chat mode. There's a lot of other versions you can use that allow you to do like inline reviews of your code, inline AI chats and stuff like that. And those things, they do work better and they are more powerful. But there's a lot of power in what you can do just in the free version. Now, what I like here is Cursor's asking me, hey, do you want me to always allow this to run or do you just want to run this time? I just always only let it run for this time. I don't want Cursor to have all sorts of permissions that it's allowed to do or that it just can do stuff without it prompting me every time. That's another way to be careful and code safely is just don't give it unfettered access to everything, make it ask every time. All right, let's see what it said here. All right, it said it added some tests. Let's go look. All right, so here's what I'm talking about. This is what I'm going to do for my own pull request. I'm going to go in here and say, okay, little code review here. It imported these things. It must have a reason it imported them. Let's take a look. All right, all this is new code. Let's understand what it's doing. Right, and then we go through, we review the changes, right? Immediately, I'm going to run npm test, make sure they still all pass. All right, they passed. It looks pretty good to me. I haven't reviewed it all. We're not going to go through that for time's sake. We're not going to review it and make sure everything's perfect here. I'm not going to actually commit this change. I'm going to undo it right now. But that's something you can do. It's also a way you can learn, right? Oh, what are some of these tests, right? What is it? Returns the same determinist ID regardless of the argument order. Interesting. Like it's coming up with different tests that maybe I wouldn't think of. It's also not impacting any of my production code, right? And then I can run through, and after I run the tests, and I can look at some of the outputs and see, are they what I was expecting? All right, let's jump back to the slides. And I recommend that you do that even if you're not using AI, because I know for myself, there's sometimes I'm coding something across multiple days, and I may have put a comment in there that's a to-do comment. I may have put a comment in there that says, clean this up later, right? And I don't remember it now 3 days later. I've got pulled into 2 meetings and I've had to work on another emergency project in between. And now I come back to this code and I switch back to that branch and I don't look. So when I go through and I review every file that's changed in my local editor and do my own personal code review, I make sure I finished all the things. Sometimes I'll even pull up the requirements or specifications that were given to me while I'm doing that code review. Did I meet all of the items in this requirement or specification that was requested of me? And having that ticket that you're working on and the code changes up there right with you. I mean, I haven't done this yet. I just thought of it right now. You could almost type in that requirement to AI and ask AI if you've met all the requirements. That's something I'll have to try in the future. So maybe we can do that in the future and have a future webinar on something like that. All right, let me share my slides again. All right. All right, so some things that you want to talk about for safe usage for AI and some guardrails. I already mentioned this, I'm going to mention again. Start small, small scope, right? Start with testing, start with something that's not necessarily going to impact production, right? And I'm going to reiterate this because it's super important. Only generate what a human can realistically review, right? If I was generating tests and I was adding the Jest and a few test libraries to the What We Will code base, and I was very conscientious not to add all the tests, right? I could have just said add tests for everything, give me 100% coverage everywhere. But I knew that the person reviewing that code was going to look at take the first half hour and just be like, oh. Then you're going to get that fatigue and you're just going to assume that those null reference checks are in there or everything's typed correctly. And I know we can use linters and we can even put linters in our build to make sure that we're not using things like any and stuff like that. But I still look for that because sometimes code has bugs. Sometimes code makes mistakes. So no secrets, no blind trust, right? I don't trust that AI is always going to remember its rules. One of the articles I'm going to actually use to prompt AI to help me generate my cursor rules, the person specifically says in that article, I have to remind it to go back to the rules. I've got this rules file. I still have to go back at the end. And sometimes I see it's not following. I'm going to say, hey, are you following my rules? And it's like, oops, my bad. Goes and starts following the rules. So this is the quote from the article is the image in the slide. You have to periodically remember to do the rules. So another thing that you should do is only give it the minimum permissions needed. As you saw, I didn't just say allow it to run npm test every time. I want you to prompt me and ask me to run commands on my system. I want you to, I don't want it to have unfettered access to GitHub because I don't want it to be able to do a pull request or commit to main or do any of those types of things. Even though I might tell it to do that in my cursor rule, it's shown that it hasn't always followed the rules, one. Two, again, this is just software. Cursor is built on Visual Studio Code. It's got AI hooks into it. It can have bugs in it. It might be able to do something that you don't want it to do. So I'd rather give it permission each time than just trust it fully out of the box. And I also still feel like at times it acts more like an entry-level developer than a senior engineer or an architect. And so you want to go in and make sure it's doing things correctly. Also, when you're doing your rules, it's important that you iterate them, right? I'd say work with your team. If you're working on a team, create, maybe don't have a meeting, but maybe just start these rules, the cursor rules or whatever, Claude rules, whatever tool you're using, and then put a PR up and have the team discuss it. What do we actually want it to do? What types of things? What is our architecture? How do we want it to make sure it maintains that architecture? Those types of things. And again, I'm going to say this. AI is not responsible for the code it generates. We are. So we have to make sure that when we're using AI, that that code is quality code before we, put it into production. Let's see. I'm just reviewing my notes. And I do think anytime you touch security, you should have a mandatory security review. We do have a policy in the code base we're working on now with what we will to not touch security code with AI, right? We want a human involved in that and not have AI start generating that code. Um, and that's for now. That rule might change. We might find that it actually does generate okay code, and we just want to make sure we have a security review of it. But if something touches security code, I would recommend at a minimum, if you're using AI to do that, you make sure you tag it. Have a tag in your GitHub that says security review, and have somebody who's more experienced with security potentially review that, or another set of eyes. All right, so what are some of the things that we can use AI for? I said start small, maybe on things that are not quite as visible in production. I mentioned observability earlier. That may be something that you could add to start using observability or refine your logging. But one of the things I would think of is, we talk about technical debt a lot, and that term seems to have really become overused. But I've never worked on a project besides a greenfield project, and even greenfield projects get technical debt pretty quickly if you're trying to move fast, right? But you can use AI to help you refactor it. If you find that you've written a really long function and it's not doesn't have a single responsibility, you can ask AI to help you break that function up so that it's in smaller functions that all have a single responsibility, or potentially converting old patterns to modern patterns, or reducing duplication. I've worked in a code base that it was copy pasta code, right? It just, every time you needed this function, you copied it over. You could say to AI, help go look at the code base and find a bunch of functions that are all the same, similar across different areas, and can we move that into a library? Again, I've mentioned writing unit tests, suggesting missing test scenarios, looking for edge case issues, um, maybe converting manual test cases to automated ones. You could also have AI help you summarize complex modules. Let's say you've jumped into a brand new code base and you're working on that, and you haven't, gotten familiar with it. You could ask AI to summarize it. Now, I want to be a little careful sometimes with 100% trusting what AI's summaries are. My experience is it's worked pretty well with code because it's fine-tuned on code. But the best description I ever heard of a large language model is it answers your question by saying the answer to your question might look something like this. Because it's the way large language models are, is they're just saying that I've seen all these words close to each other. I'm very simplifying it, but I've seen all these words close enough to each other in all these settings. So this is probably what an answer would look like. And it's also based on the facts it was trained on. So be careful with trusting AI summaries, but it can get you started potentially, is what I would say. Um, Documentation is huge, right? If you can have AI write documentation, again, validate it's correct, right? We can't just say generate documentation and then publish it out there. But one great place is APIs. APIs are pretty well, understood. If they have good parameters, and you should be able to generate API documentation. Be careful about having AI generate sample code in other languages that you're not familiar with. That's one caveat I want to say, because if you're not familiar with it, you can't run it. It might produce that wrong code. So I would say if you're going to use AI to generate code in other languages, try and test that, or have somebody test that and help make sure it's correct. You can convert from one language to another. You might have something in JavaScript and you want to have it in TypeScript, and you could say to AI, help me convert this to TypeScript. If you're starting a greenfield project, you could ask AI to help you with the folder structure, creating the, generic modules and stuff that you want to have in there, and doing some of that boilerplate code. Another great way is data seeding. I was working at a company, and we had the data. We couldn't just use production data for testing. I've worked at places where you can because there's no PII, there's nothing else in the data, so we can pull it in and just scrub a teeny bit of data out of there. But this had a lot of PII in it, and so um, the one of the engineers that had worked there had generated something where it replaced all the data with generic data. It used superhero names. They had a dictionary of superhero names, and we all got a chuckle sometimes seeing Batman and villains and stuff, and Magneto in the code, or not in the code, but in the database. But that was a really cool thing. But now you could use something like AI to generate that really quickly, right? Having it help you generate data seeding, test code, test data in your database, and just filling it up so that you're not using, but it's realistic, but you're not using any production data with PII or anything like that. Again, I'm going to recommend that you use AI to also help you build UI tests and get more coverage of your tests, because then you can trust AI as it makes changes more. All right, I'm going to jump back into real quick. Any questions at this point? All right, moving on to the next slide. All right, so if you're working on a team, I think it's super important to discuss these things with your teammates. Um, you know, make sure that you have the okay to use AI in your business. I say that, and I'm going to smile a little bit because I think now most businesses are probably saying you must use AI. But it doesn't mean that you don't have any agency in this, right? You have the agency to, work with your teammates to determine what things you're comfortable doing with AI, what things you're not comfortable doing with AI at this time, right? You start out small, document how your team should use AI. We did that with, I think I'm just sharing my whole screen up there. So let me pull this up to the top screen. We did that in What We Will. We have an AI usage policy. Um, I think it was Simon who put this together, and then we did a PR and we all reviewed it. This is where we highlighted, please don't, right? Don't feed any real user data into the AI tool. Keep all our secrets safe. Don't expose your .env files. Don't give it access to GitHub repositories, right? This is a work in progress. We started this, and as we get more comfortable with the AI and the tools that we're using, we're going to update it, we're going to change it, and we're going to loosen it up. One of the things that was highlighted in that policy is don't use AI to do any database work. And I haven't had any personal issues with database work, but other people have on the team. So they said, hey, let's not use AI to do database work. It may not it hasn't picked the right data types in the past. It hasn't done some things that, that I like. And maybe that's something where we have to get some rules for our AI to learn what our architectural standards are for the database so it follows them. So that was our AI markdown file that you just saw. I would highly recommend putting one of those into your repository so the team knows and agrees upon this. And again, the here be dragons areas is super important because that's the things you don't want AI doing, right? Be careful here. And another example is security code. We talked about that. Your AI policy might say, if AI does anything around security code, tag it with security and have a security person review it. Again, experiment, measure, and iterate, right? That's the same thing we talk about in Scrum, where what we do in our retrospective is we say what went well, what didn't go well, what do we think will help us do better in the future. We try that, and then we ask ourselves, did that help us do better? Hopefully it's something we can measure, right? That we know it actually did do better. I think that's the part a lot of people miss is measuring, did it help us improve things? And then saying, yes, we want to keep doing that, or we don't want to keep doing that. So now we're going to jump into Cursor again real quick. And I'm going to put it up on this top screen. And I'm going to start a new agent. And I'm going to pull in my prompt. And I'll just tell you my prompt says, review the existing architecture and coding styles and generate strict cursor rules files based upon the existing code base, solid principles in this article. And I'll pull the article up for you too. So I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to pull that article up. I was going to mention this article when I was talking about the pull request and doing your own personal code review before you do a pull request. There was a funny kerfuffle. My history is in Microsoft development. So Microsoft at their Learn website had posted something about the Git flow, and it's a flow I had used previously and many years ago, and it worked really well. We weren't doing continuous integration at that time, and but they changed. The person who wrote it is this Vincent, and they had AI do something. And if you read this, bug fixes from rel branch may be continually morged back into develop. Morged. That's a pretty interesting. I haven't used morged yet in my Git usage, but anyways, that was kind of funny. Where it did, they used AI to generate this image, and it just really mangled it, and we all had a good laugh at that. But this is what the article I'm telling AI to go look at, and it's a good article on cursor rules. It's got cursor rules this person came up with, but the most important thing they said, it was trial and error. They went back and forth quite a few times to determine what were all the good rules. And so let's see what it says. Before generating the files, I need one scope discussion so I can set form front matter correctly for each rule. How should I apply these rules? Mixed one core. This is interesting. Remember how I said I did the same exact prompt earlier today to test my demo, and I've got a different reply now than I had before. Before, it actually just created multiple files. Mixed one core, always a prior rule. So I'm going to go with A because it says recommended. Let's see what that does. Oop. No, I want A and continue. So non-deterministic, right? It did something different this time when I pasted in the same exact question earlier. All right, so now it's saying it wants me to fetch that URL. Should I allow it? And again, this is where I'm being very careful. I'm not saying allow every time. You can go to URLs. No, ask me specifically when you want to access the internet. There was a, I think it was an NPM package that they went in and they modified it, and it started doing Bitcoin mining on people's computers when they installed that package. And then there was something else very similar. I don't remember the exact scenario where they were like, oh, a free AI tool, and just grab this, package to Visual Studio Code and add it in. But it was really, again, just wanting to get access to your file system, and it stole a bunch of secrets and started encrypting your hard drive and stuff. So this is one of the reasons why I want to be very careful, right? This is something upstream to me. It's something that Cursor owns, and yes, it's a company, but companies make mistakes. Software has bugs. So again, I want to be careful and explicit in what I allow it to do. And interestingly enough, it generated, I think, 4 files when I did this earlier today. We see a couple files here. We have a core workflow. I'm going to make this bigger. I'm going to come in and hopefully this does not zoom in the font. Sorry if this is a little hard to read. Okay, it's got React Next.js. Talking about things like use server components by default, add use client only when state effect browser APIs are required. That rule looks pretty good to me. Keep page level data loading and route files and UI state handled in client components. So again, this is something I would take to the team. I would do a pull request. I would review it myself. I would do a pull request, and I would tag a bunch of people on the team and say, hey, I myself am not super familiar with Next.js. I'm not I'm more of a back-end server side C# engineer, has historically been my background. No JavaScript. I've coded in Java. I've coded in C. But this framework isn't really a super strong point for me. So I wouldn't, feel comfortable just looking at all these and saying these are great. I would tag this with people who is, hey, you're the Next expert. You're the React expert. Please look at these rules. We've got um, we're using Supabase, and it's got some server actions, testing standards, right? So it comes in and it's on this. I'm not going to review all these live and make sure they're going to meet our code base, but my point is it's generated a starting point for us. So now we have Cursor rules. We don't always trust that the rules are going to be followed. We might have to remind Cursor to follow them, and we might have to make sure our permissions are really strict so that Cursor can't go do things we don't want it to do. But at least it has an idea of how we want it to work. And that's a great starting point for me specifically too, because it's not, I'm new to this. I'm new to Cursor. I'm new to these things. And, you know, I'm not quite sure where to start. What would I have done in the past? I would have gone to Stack Overflow. A lot of these AIs seem to be have coded on Reddit and Stack Overflow and blog posts, and have a lot of that. And 2.5, 3 years ago, when I was looking at AI, it almost felt like it was just doing copy and paste from Stack Overflow, which kind of cracked me up. It was I could have done that just a little faster now. So it's become much better than that, especially with agents that can go and look at your entire code base. I'm just jumping back into where did Zoom go? I want to make sure everything's looking good in the Zoom meeting. Yep. All right, great. We've got a couple chats. Just going to check those. That AI policy, it isn't publicly available. I'd have to ask the team if it was okay to share, and I would not have a problem. I personally wouldn't have a problem sharing it, but I want to check with the team and everything. I've seen a thumbs up from Caitlin, so I think we should be able to share it. It is in our code base, and I'm going to take a little break real quick and just give a shout out to everybody. What we will. It's a web platform we're working on for the Tech Workers Coalition. It's there to help people. A lot of the help is going to be focused right now on people who've been laid off, and trying to help them, navigate the legality of being laid off and what things they should be able to do, and what things the laws and everything else support them doing, and being able to move forward, help them find jobs, help them network. But that platform, we're looking for people to code on it. So if you're somebody who's interested in helping contribute to that, it's a volunteer platform. Please let us know, and we'd love to have, if you're entry level all the way up to architects, right? If you're interested in helping develop that platform with us, please, just reach out and let us know. It is in that code base. Caitlin, you're coming in?
Yeah, maybe if I can say a few words.
Sure.
Yeah, specifically, we're trying to create this like secure communication channel for folks like when they get kicked off of company networks and company email, Slack. We're bringing in some folks from CWA who can help folks like understand severance negotiation and like maybe in that moment think about unionizing, but at the very least, like think about how to do collective action, even if they're not part of a union. Yeah, we're also providing a bunch of resources on the chat. So in terms of like volunteer, it's currently volunteer, but we're trying to get grant funding and it's structured as a tech co-op. So if we do get grant funding, it's like everyone who's part of it has ownership in it. And there's a lot of great tech co-ops in Europe, but not so many in the US. And we want to try to figure out how to develop in a different way, alternative to like big tech. So for folks that are interested, you get to have the amazing mentorship of folks like Tim, which is huge, huge plus, especially like, yeah, we have some folks coming in from like coding boot camps who haven't been able to find work who are looking also for like, mentorship. And so these projects are meant, one, for folks who are laid off to get some like job experience. You can put what we will, as part of your job experience, because a lot of folks, like it's easier to get a job when you have a job. And also it is a tech worker cooperative that we're trying to formalize legally. And we will get to a point where we can kind of understand what it means to have ownership in the co-op. And already people are making amazing tools like Mary's different ways of matching people to jobs. And Simon, you saw last week, different ways of like battling ATS systems. And so there's a lot of cool projects and hope folks will be interested in like helping in the mission, which is to like organize tech workers in this like crazy moment on a platform that is built through a tech cooperative. So yeah, quick
Yeah.
note and passing back to Tim.
Thanks. That was really great. And it's a really cool team, really great people to work with, very, very nice people. And if it's something where, you're looking for a job and you are able to contribute, you can have a reference too, right? Right now, if somebody's, Caitlin said, I need a reference, I'd be like, absolutely, give you a reference because we've worked together and I've seen the way she works and the code she produces, and I'd be happy to give her a reference. So that's the type of thing that you could also benefit from. So now back to the coding, or back to careful coding with AI, after our short break there. So I mentioned earlier the quote, rewrite this function, but double the lines of code it takes to do it. What are our metrics? What are we being measured by? And I hope you're not being measured by your lines of code, because again, you can just have AI help you with that. But really, I find that as an engineer, I like creating things and I like delivering value, right? Ultimately, what I really like is helping people, right? But that's by delivering value too when I'm in a job, right? And that's really what I would suggest you want to try and measure, right? Sorry, hit the mouse and need to go back one slide. So really, you want to measure if you're delivering value. So I'm just going to do a shout out real quick to
Sorry, Tim, you're not actually sharing.
Oh, sorry, I hit share, and thank you so much. I had it up on the screen and so you didn't see my snafu of going to the wrong slide. There we go. Thank you so much. So like KPIs versus value stream, I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with the DORA metrics, you look at those. Those are about delivering value to the business, and it helps you also find, with value stream mapping, it helps you find where the bottlenecks really are. And again, I said earlier, bottlenecks a lot of times might not be generating code, right? Adding more developers or AI developers might just break your system. So what do you need to do to deliver value, and how do you measure that? Some of the ways you measure that, according to the DORA, is the lead time, how long it takes you from idea to that code being in production, how long it takes you from when you start working on that code till it goes into production, how often can you deploy, what is your change failure rate? Like, when do you have to roll back a change, right? And then when you do have to roll back a change, what is your mean time to recovery? Those are all things that can indicate how quickly you can deliver value, right? And so those are the things I would highly recommend, that if you're in a position of influence, which if you're an engineer, I think you are, you have to manage up and you have to manage down a lot of times. Everyone seems to be really busy. And I do think that if you take on one of these things, even if your boss, of course, get permission, but even if your boss is saying, hey, that's not our focus right now, but you put a little effort into it, your boss is going to see the value, right? You have maybe do a little demo, a coding day where the team gets to do work on their own thing, something like that. And then you can push it forward, and your boss might really appreciate that. You being able to help them deliver more value, right? And I laugh about the, story points, right? Oh, we want more story points. The first time I heard that 15 years ago, developer leaned over into me and goes, all right, so we just double the size of everything going forward, right? I'm like, it's so easy to game, right? How many PRs do you do? Well, I can do a lot of PRs where I just change one line of code, right? Is that easy to review? Is it easy to know the impact on the system? No, you want to, have a nice sized pull request. You don't want to have one that's too large that you're going to get fatigue in, but you don't want to have 200 small ones either. And of course, lines of code, I don't know anybody who thinks that's a good measure anymore. And I'm not sure. And here's the thing, that the Goodhart's law is something to keep in mind, right? When a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure, right? And that, the idea behind that is, as soon as you start measuring it, people work to that number, not delivering value. If you tell me lines of code, I'm working to lines of code. If you tell me the number of PRs, I'm working to the number of PRs. If you tell me, look, we don't want to have any production bugs, we're measuring the change failure rate, and we're going to tell you, that actually delivers value. We're delivering higher quality code. One of the ways that I've done that in 2 different organizations was by going from, in one, to only 50% test coverage and no UI tests, to a respectable 80-85% code coverage. You don't need everything covered with unit tests. And then having a significant number of UI tests, and all those tests ran on every pull request. And once they ran, if any of the tests failed, the pull request was automatically rejected. And the developer got feedback quickly. So they just submitted this, they were working on it. Now they've got feedback, they can fix it. Not a week later when it's gone to QA, QA's manually tested it, and then gotten you the bugs back. And when you've forgotten about that code because you've worked on 12 different things since then. So that's the kind of thing where if you can measure those things that maybe can't be gamed, right? You know, how long does it take to deliver a feature from idea to production? Really hard to game that, right? You can't, it's either in production or it's not, you know, unless you just straight out lie, right? And then the other thing I want to say is help AI surface and do all that hidden work, documentation, code comments, refactoring, paying off technical debt. That's a huge place that AI, I find that almost every place I've worked at, we've never had the time to take on that technical debt, to take on all that hidden work. And a lot of times it just doesn't get done. And then the code base gets more convoluted. It gets more stretched out. It gets more, we have more copy pasta. We have more duplicate functions. AI can do those things, right? It can look for things that, and do things quickly that we've always wanted to do. So that's another place I would really say focus on with your AI. When I have, you know, I always wanted to do this in the code base. Hey, work with AI, have it become your partner. I had in another slide, and I didn't talk to it too much about pair programming with AI. And the concept there is pair programming is you sit down with another developer and you both share one keyboard, and one person codes a little bit, the other person might comment a little bit while you're coding, and then you hand the keyboard over to the other person. And I've done that with AI a little bit, where I ask it to do something. As a matter of fact, I did that a little bit with the changing that function to return the two initials. I did a little AI looking. I said, I don't like that. It's too, you know, it's all one line, you know, or whatever. They didn't make it so it was very readable. And I said, you know, if I come back and I want to look at this function in 2 weeks or a month or a year, or somebody else has to maintain this function, I want to spread it out a little bit more. So then I took it and did a few changes there too. And I think you can do that with AI as well. Kind of have it do a little work, you do a little work, go back and forth with AI, and you've got a built-in pair programmer, and you don't have to call up somebody and get on Teams or Zoom or something and do that. All right. How's our time looking? Okay, we're still doing okay. Let's see. All right, so what are the takeaways? Takeaways, stick to the core fundamentals, work with your team, run a team discussion, figure out your AI usage, how you want to do it, set up your strict rules, make sure your permissions are not, you know, too wide open, you know, tighten down your permissions for AI, add an AI MD, add rules for whatever AI you're using. In our What We Will project, we added Claude rules and Cursor rules, and those are the two that we kind of said, hey, start out with these. Start with small tasks. Work with your team to build a PR checklist. Have it a public PR checklist, right? And maybe Jenny doesn't need to, you know, look at this checklist all the time because she's got half of it memorized. But Muhammad is new to this and really likes the checklist and actually just goes down the checklist every time and make sure all those things are there. You know, make it more inclusive and bigger, and you know, you can skip over the things that you don't necessarily need. And remember, your job is to deliver value to the organization, right? The managers may not be on the ground. You might have a team lead who does do some coding, but then their manager doesn't really do coding. If you're an engineer and you're on the ground doing the work, right, you're going to be the closest to understanding what needs to be done, what's helpful, what's not helpful. So try to organize as a team and get those types of things in place for you so that the whole team can be a success and deliver that value. Also, don't forget that AI is non-deterministic. We saw that. It produced something slightly different with those rules. It asked me a question this time, but it didn't before. Maybe a slightly different agent. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it might give you different code. And in those cases, what I would recommend is having a second AI. Check it out. You know, there's a free version of Copilot. There's a free version of Cursor. You've seen me just stick something in Copilot, you know, like generic Copilot, and have it give some answers. have different multiple AIs be your pairing partner, and you can get different answers potentially, and then use your knowledge to pick the best one. And then again, focus on delivering value. I've got some resources here in the slides. That cursor rules that I sent out, that's in there. There's a blog post by Scott Hanselman and Mark Ruzanovich. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Sorry if I'm not. They both work at Microsoft. Mark is the CTO of Azure, and the principal developer advocate, I think, is Scott. I'm not sure. His title's just recently changed. They had a paper that they published that is about how do we deal with AI and the fact that it's an entry-level programmer, and if we can develop 10 times the code with a senior engineer using AI, we can replace Next.js in a week. Remember, though, that had tons of tests, right? That's what allowed them to do that. We still need entry-level developers. If we don't have any entry-level developers, we're never going to get any senior developers, right? We're never going to get any architects. And so they have proposed in this paper that we still have entry-level developers, and we have like a journeyman program where we raise them up in, we're going to need senior developers. We're going to need to invest in this. And maybe if you're a startup, you don't do that. But if you're a big company, you're Chase Manhattan Bank, you're, Ernst & Young, you're these big companies, you're a big insurance company, invest in having entry-level developers, mid-level developers, and figure out the ways to get them so that they can be senior engineers, because we're always going to need humans to review this. Always, I say always, maybe we're not always going to need to review this. Scott Galloway has a really great blog. He's been doing a lot with AI. He's been doing a lot with generating local models. One of the things I really like about his posts is he talks about all the samples and how they're always just throw all this data up into the AI. And this is not when you're using AI to code. This is when you're adding AI to your application. And he is really in favor of us using AI for what it's good at, which is maybe connecting some of the dots. But when we need to extract data from a document, don't send that whole document up to AI. Use the tools you have to extract the data, put that in a small database, and then send just the pieces you need up to AI. It's going to reduce your token count, and it becomes much more effective. So I recommend his blog post, Simplicity First. That's by Chris Woodruff. And he is a really big advocate for not over-engineering. And he's talking about modular monoliths and things like that, where maybe we just don't automatically go to this entire massive distributed architecture for a website. We need a website to just do a few small things, right? And we've over-engineered it. So that's a really good article. Kiro is what I mentioned earlier from AWS, and it's the spec-driven development. And this is a good link to get started. I got a quote up here from a senior architect, and you can read it. I'm not going to read it out loud to you, but it's the same thing. It forgets things. You've got to remind it. It always needs a little guidance, and you've got to set that guidance up. So it's really, really important to set that guidance up. All right. So what questions do we have? I'm going to pull up, see a new, Jose, thank you for the tech co-op. Love the idea. That's awesome. I love the idea too. So does anybody have any questions on what they've seen? Abdul, you've got your hand raised. Go ahead. You can unmute. And
well, thank you so much for the presentation. That's really insightful. I had a question with regards to the AI forgetting your rules and or your guardrails. Have you ever experimented with having a local model or a model running locally where you have some control over the context window? And or have you ever experimented with short-term versus long-term context windows and efficiencies of scale, so to speak? Do you think that could be helpful?
I'll answer the second question first. I haven't really experimented with short-term, long-term. I've had some longer conversations with the AI and the more agentic type AIs that they look at your code. They ask you some questions. You go back and forth a few times, but I haven't really had any performance issues with it. But again, I'm fairly new to this. I haven't dug in too deep. I know I asked a senior engineer friend of mine about doing a Kiro demo here, and I was thinking about maybe doing a demo. I didn't have time to put it all together. And the quote was, "Be prepared to talk a lot while you wait for Kiro to produce the results." Again, that's that spec-driven development where you put a spec in and it goes ahead, a specification in, and it goes ahead and delivers all this stuff. And I would say, that I would be interested to, kind of experiment with that, but I haven't done anything. To answer your first question about the local models, I personally haven't done that yet. I was just reading an article the other day about somebody who just started doing that. And my next slide is actually, what would you like to see next and it's the first one, local models for coding assistance, right? We don't have to pass anything up to the cloud. We can use a local model. And it sounds like maybe that'd be something you'd be interested in. Maybe another demo from requirements to code with Kiro, crafting your AI team's AI rules. What do you think? So it's just kind of a prompt. Send in your ideas if you would like to see some more webinars. I think I'm hearing a vote already for the local models with coding assistance and going over that. If you have any ideas, feel free to share them. I could stick a poll up. Let me see if there's an easy way to do a poll. Poll quizzes. All right, let's see. Oh, it's something external. So never mind. Any other questions from anybody? Feel free. I'm a very advocate of there are no dumb questions. If you don't know something and you want to ask, please just ask. That's how we learn. All right. Well, if that's no more questions, I will say thank you all so much for attending. I really enjoy doing this. I like teaching. I like helping people learn. I'm, like I said, new to this myself. I'm discovering it and really enjoying it. I'm liking working with coding, AI coding. But again, we need to be careful. We need to make sure that it's generating work. And last thing I'll leave you with is AI can't be responsible. It's the human that's responsible. So make sure that when you're using AI, that you're comfortable saying that, yes, I did this, whether it's I coded it or I approved it or I checked it in. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon or whatever time it is where you are, evening, morning, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon in another webinar.
Awesome. Thanks so much.